Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we will be going over PTC-4, which means Potential Tropical Cyclone 4, which will most likely be a tropical storm, if not Hurricane Debby. So let's go ahead and get into this video. So here we are starting off. PTC-4 is currently over Cuba, but before we look into that in depth, I would like to look at the Pacific, where we have three areas, one of which has a 90% chance to develop into a tropical depression or a tropical storm, and then the other one has a 50% chance to develop into a tropical depression or tropical storm. Then we have Hurricane Carlotta, which is an 80-mile-per-hour storm, but it is going out to sea, so it is not supposed to do too much to any land or any thing like that. So let's keep looking at PTC-4. Once again, this is over Cuba, and I'm going to pull up the satellite imagery of it currently. So this is our satellite of it right now over portions of Cuba. It is still a little disorganized, but it does definitely have some higher cloud top in some of these areas over here where we're having those darker blacks and even whites. So those are very tall clouds, which is definitely what you want if you want a tropical system to form. But we definitely do not want this because that does mean it is developing more. So let's take a look at its track here. This is supposed to develop into a tropical depression later tonight. And it is actually not fully tropical right now, and it's supposed to stay not fully tropical until it gets over portions of the Gulf of Mexico. And so then this is supposed to form into a tropical storm here as it moves on. And then it is supposed to make a landfall about where the Florida Peninsula and Panhandle do connect. And then this is actually supposed to get out over the Atlantic again and possibly re-strengthen. But we will look at some of those models, as some of them are not exactly showing that same scenario, and some of them could. Some of the models are showing this that it could make two landfalls, which I could see happening, but it is more on the unlikely side. But this is its wind speed probabilities for tropical storm winds, and currently we already have about a 50% chance in portions of the Gulf of Mexico on the west side of Florida. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of our models. Starting off here, this is the GFS model and our tropical wave. Here it is right here over Cuba. Still very large, which is what it is right now. But let's keep this moving here. And it does get over the portions of the Gulf of Mexico and does make it to possibly tropical storm status most likely, as it then makes a landfall. And this actually shows that landfall further south. So let's zoom into this a little bit more. And it shows a landfall further south near Tampa. And then it does cross over, strengthens into a stronger tropical storm, and then down to a hurricane. And then might even be able to make it to a Category 2 hurricane, if not a strong one. And then it does stall, actually, and just hits portions of the Outer Banks of North Carolina and just lashes it. And then it moves on out of here finally, and then we will not have to deal with that anymore. So let's take a look at the European model. There's our tropical wave. This shows it a little further north than it actually is. But let's keep this moving. Does get that L popped off later today into tomorrow morning. And then it does eventually get it into the Gulf of Mexico. Doesn't really strengthen it too much, but it does make a more northern landfall. So let's zoom into this. And then does bring some heavier rain and gusty winds to portions of the southeast. And then does get back off the coast and strengthens to a tropical storm, maybe even a low-end hurricane, as it then makes a secondary landfall in South Carolina and moves back over portions of Georgia as a possible lower end Category 1 hurricane, and then keeps moving, and then just brings lots of rain and gusty winds to portions of the southeast. Um, but the reason why this system would make two landfalls actually is because we do get a trough that digs down, and the flow around it is like this, and so then that would push this system uh, back into portions of the southeast after it makes its first landfall. But let's take a look at some more models. The icon model. So let's keep this moving here. It does pop off that low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico, and then strengthens it to a tropical storm. But let's zoom into it here. Strengthens it into a tropical storm. Does make a landfall about where the National Hurricane Center is showing it, but maybe a little more north. And then does lash portions of the southeast and gets back over the water just barely and strengthens into a Category 2 hurricane and then sits there and struggles to try to make it to a Category 3, but I don't believe it will. And then it makes a landfall in North Carolina again. And then could even get back out over the water, but this model run does not go out far enough. But it most likely will get back over the water, maybe strengthen a little bit, but it will be going out to sea, so you won't have to worry about it. Next up is the Canadian model. Not doing the greatest job, but honestly, it's definitely doing better than the European model. Um, but I do want to say the European model does not really strengthen it over the Gulf of Mexico. And this will get into the Gulf of Mexico most likely. And it will strengthen no matter what the European says. Because, I mean, the water is up to the low 90s all along portions of the west coast of Florida, which is where it's going to be. So it definitely will develop into at least most likely a tropical depression. So here's the Canadian model. Gets it down to tropical storm status about 2 p.m. tomorrow, as it then makes a landfall as a 1,001 millibar low pressure. So let's zoom into this. Has a more north landfall, which I could see happening for sure, and then lashes portions of a little to the west of Savannah, Georgia, with I guess you could call it the eye wall, even though we wouldn't have one exactly. But if it was a hurricane, then that would be where the eye wall would be, if that makes sense. Sorry, play on words there. But this does keep going. Gets back out over the water a little bit, but then heads on out of here. So next up, we're going to be looking at two hurricane models here. Um, so starting this one around August 3rd at 8 p.m., this is the HFA model, and usually they are pretty good with their strength, as some of these caught on actually to Hurricane Beryl when we were not expecting it to be strong at all, and then one of these models just showed it being a Category 5, which then happened, um, but no one was expecting that, but this showed it a while before. So let's go ahead and get started here. Here is the very tip of Florida, and these little islands here. Those are the Keys, and this little belt there, right above the line that I just drew. So let's keep this moving. Gets it down to a stronger tropical storm, and might even be able to get it to a low-end Category 1 in the Gulf of Mexico, which I could see, but most likely would just be a strong tropical storm. Excuse me. Then gets it moving over portions of Georgia. But I do want to mention, look at these bands here. Uh, all of these areas going to be a very big tornado threat, which we call the dirty side, which is the east side, and a little bit of the north as well. So the east and northeast, sometimes even the southeast, definitely has the highest chance for quick spin-up tornadoes, which are very hard to warn because they usually happen between radar scans. So it is just very hard to find tornadoes. And then it does get out over the water, tries to strengthen a little bit, and then makes another landfall in portions of South Carolina, and then moves back a little bit over portions of Georgia, and then jerks back over the waters off the coast of South Carolina, and then comes back in possibly for another landfall in portions of South Carolina or North Carolina. But yeah, very, very weird system. And then this is the HFP model. Here it is, August 4th around 2 a.m. And here it goes. Has it as a low-end Category 1 hurricane making landfall in where the National Hurricane Center has it, but a little further north. And then this does eventually get into portions of Georgia with that tornado threat for sure. And gets back out over the water barely, and then keeps this moving and strengthens it a little bit and possibly makes another landfall in portions of North Carolina. So next, this is the Storm Prediction Center. This is the severe weather outlook for today, and we actually recently got an upgrade to a slight risk in portions of Delaware and New Jersey. And then we have a large marginal risk that goes all the way down into portions of the southeast, and a small marginal risk that includes Tucson, Arizona, and then another marginal risk in east Colorado as well, and portions of Nebraska. So there is a less than 2% tornado risk in all of these areas, but we still cannot rule out a weak spin-up tornado. And then we have a 15% wind risk in portions of Delaware and New Jersey. And then a 5% hail risk in portions of Colorado and Nebraska. So you could have some small hail, but most likely not going to have any large hail. Then next we have the day 2 outlook. We have a slight risk in portions of the north central areas of the U.S. Which does not have a tornado risk, but we could get maybe a small 2% tornado risk. But then we do have a marginal risk in portions of the southeast that does go up the eastern coast. And then we have a small marginal risk in portions of Florida for this tropical system, and that actually includes a 2% tornado risk. And then this slight risk includes a 15% wind risk and then a 15% hail risk. But then that marginal risk in portions of the southeast and the east coast, just a 5% wind risk. But some of these hurricane models, once again, we'll touch on this again. These hurricane models are showing it a little later, but I could see impacts as early tomorrow morning in portions of near the tip of Florida on the west side, as we do have that marginal risk. But with that, one more look at that's the wrong one. One more look at this cone of uncertainty. So here it is. So it will most likely be a tropical storm around 2 a.m. on Sunday, which is which is in 2 days, as the time of making this video. And then our storm surge, up to 4 feet. You could have up to 4 feet in portions of Tampa Bay, near Charlotte Harbor, and then maybe up all the way to Suwannee River. So we will have to watch for some small storm surge threat as well. In the flooding threat, we have a slight risk, which is at least a 15% of risk for flooding for day 3. So yeah, day 3 you have a slight risk for flash flooding. And then once again, here's another graphic of our possible rainfall. We could have rainfall up to portions of 8 inches near portions of Tampa, and then just widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain as well with this system. So with that, thank you for watching. Sorry about the, guess you could say, stumbling of words. And I will see you all in the next one. Have a good one, everybody.